26th, 2020. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of the live stream. This was supposed to be a recorded episode with the SmallRig XT4 cage, which is sitting behind that teleprompter over there, and I'm liking it very much, but I didn't get to that because of some production stuff. Some housekeeping, first of all. I'm on a brand new computer, so I had to kind of rebuild everything. First thing I need to know is, are my audio levels okay, and is the picture okay right now? Connection should be fine, but if David, Joe, anybody can give me some information on that, that would be awesome. And again, welcome to the show. So again, audio and video chat. Looks like we had a couple of people in here in the chat right at the beginning. They're coming back in. I don't know what's going on, but I appreciate the thumbs up. And here we are. This is the C47 channel. And every week there's content on Wednesdays and all of that stuff. David says something. What is that? It's hard to see. So I've also got Ecamm Live installed, brand new on this system. And so I'm getting all these pop-ups, and it's not completely configured exactly the way I'd like. Morning, Sam. And if you could just let me know if the audio and the picture are working fine. All looks and sounds good. Thank you for the thumbs up. If my levels are a little hot, let me know. I can adjust those. If my exposure's a little weird, that would also be helpful to know, because I have a MacBook Pro that has an incredibly bright screen now. So it is kind of hard. What I've been doing is I've been switching over and testing like Adobe RGB presets and Rec 709 presets to make sure that exposure is okay. If anything, I just want to make sure that I'm just not way over or way under in terms of the exposure right now. Yeah, your question started before you were live on my end. Interesting. Okay, so I've never had that problem with Ecamm Live. And yes, I am Six String Brian. Andres, I'm going to be on the future channel. That is correct. I'm doing a panel tomorrow having to do with education. So Chris asked me to do that, and I'm honored to be on it. And that'll be at 11 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow. So you can check that out. Thank you for doing that. Camille, welcome from the Netherlands. So yeah, that's weird, Joe, that you got my question started before I was live on your end. I don't know what the deal is with that, but I'll just keep tweaking all of this inside of Ecamm Live on the new system to make sure my preferences are the same and see if that has any effect on that. Oh, the ad always cuts your beginning off. Interesting. So do you guys just skip the ad? I'm wondering how we solve that problem, because that's a great thing to discuss at the head of the show, because you're my problem solvers along with myself. So how do we solve the problem so that we don't feel like the beginning of the live stream is cut off? But for me, the advantage to Ecamm Live is when I'm live, and I just want to make sure that you're getting all of the content, but I don't want to just sit there waiting for 15, 20 seconds, kind of fiddling around. I don't love that. New lighting setup and background, kind of old setup in a way. I'm out in the barn right now, which is still a pretty unfinished space, but I've been doing production here, and there's a lot of activity in the house, and that's going to kind of be a little bit of the conversation that we have. Not that everybody has a barn, but is really sort of finding the right space and being able to effectively work from home. So Joe says, the problem is when someone like me has you in a holding pattern on the second tab, I think. Just soft open with the 5 second. Yeah, agreed. Okay, got it. It makes you watch like 4 seconds before skip is available. Okay. So in the future, what I'll do is I'll just sort of do the dumb deer in the headlights for 4 or 5 seconds. Maybe I'll just do a fake look up as if I'm realizing that we're live or some crap like that. And that'll help us do what we need to do. Good. Okay. I like it. That's our solution for now. That's what I'll go with. We'll do that for Camera and Flask later today, which will be at 3 p.m. Pacific. We're back with the full crew, myself, Ben Barden, and Caleb Pike. We're going to be talking about buy or rent. It's going to have to do with sort of our current crop of cameras and what we do there. And I'm going to have to figure out how to get some of these annoying pop-ups in Ecamm Live off, which I just think are preferences that it's fine. It's totally fine. Daniel, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everybody for being here. As always, the live streams are about conversations, and especially this one. Obviously when we're doing a show like Camera and Flask, there's a big conversation going on between myself, Caleb, and Ben, and then we're getting the chat involved. Each week, one of us is the host of the show, and we have a, a general topic, and then depending on that, you're having conversations with each other, or we're having conversations with you. But when I do this live stream, it is, yes, my thoughts and things that I want to talk about, but it is very much about this chat and what's going on there. So it is an opportunity whenever I do them for you to ask questions, for us to try to sort things out, for us to become better content creators and to really up our game in terms of tech and craft. So I open up anytime I do the live stream to general production questions as well. I might hold them for a little while depending on what's going on. And at the C47 in the chat helps me tremendously because it helps me hone in on whether or not you are feeding off of each other in terms of comments and having a conversation, helping each other figure things out, or it's a conversation that I should be having with everybody in the chat based on the question that you have. Hopefully that's not a... There you go. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping now that we've done some problem solving. Number one, just to reiterate, Camera and Flask back this week at 3 p.m. Pacific on this channel. So you'll find that here, and that will be buy or rent, and we're going to be talking about current crops of cameras. And we're also going to do a little future looking in terms of what we should be thinking about in different tiers of cameras and the camera space as a whole and what's going on with that. So I think that'll be an interesting conversation. And then secondly, which is tomorrow, I am going to be on the Future channel, Futur. That's Christo, and he's an amazing, amazing person who has been really at the forefront of, sort of looking forward in terms of content creation, but also helping people really figure out their worth when it comes to being a creative. And maybe that's a decent way of saying that. So that's going to be on that channel tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific. You should see some posts from him and everything related to that. And I am going to be one of 4 panelists or people who are going to be part of this conversation having to do with education as a whole and where we go forward with that. And each person has their own experience or background. So I think it'll be really interesting, and I'm looking forward to learning things from them as well. And then here's the big one. There's this little website called newsshooter.com that some of you may go to on a regular basis to get your news about the industry, video production, filmmaking, video journalism, all of that stuff, documentary filmmaking. And we are doing as a test for the next, I would say 4 to 6 weeks, a new show on the News Shooter YouTube channel, which is going to be called News Shooter Weekly. Very simple. It's towards the end of the week. Friday didn't really work because Matt Allard, who's one of the main contributors to the site, is based in Asia. So we didn't really want to, he was willing, but we really didn't want to eat into, the days that he could potentially be home and actually, having a life, which would be Saturday and Sunday. Though for all of us, there's no such thing as that in reality. Well, we're at home a lot now in reality, but it's just looking forward. So what we're going to do is on the News Shooter YouTube channel, at least initially, it's going to be every Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. I am really just the host and the moderator, and it's going to be Matt Allard and Eric Naso. They're really the people who are going to be the voices of the show. They're going to be the ones providing the core of the content, and then it's my job to sort of just move the topics forward and then also moderate the chat so that I can bring up questions that I think are relevant to the people there. I appreciate the withdrawals, David. We are definitely back, and unfortunately you're going to see this ugly mug a lot more in the coming future because of the News Shooter live stream. We're going to continue Cameron Flask. One is a leaded show and one is an unleaded show, and you know which are which if you go to Cameron Flask. So I'll be looking forward to a drink today, but I'll be a little bit moderate. Usually I am, because we're going to be following that up with a test for the News Shooter show, which we'll be doing right afterwards with Matt and Eric to make sure that everything's working for tomorrow. And I think that's what we've got for housekeeping. So again, chat is open for conversation. I decided that this week, because I'm still finishing up this, I'm not really a review person, I'm starting to realize, but I do want to talk about this little camera cage for the X-T4 from Small Rig, because I've been meaning to do it, and it's here, and it works, so I want to show you how I've kind of built that out. So that'll either be recorded for next week, or I'll do it as a live stream live. I haven't quite decided. If I can, I'd like it to be recorded content. And then I said, why don't we talk about working from home? It's not a conversation that we haven't had before, but for me, it's very much an evolution for a lot of us because some of us are starting to get out into the world and work. Some of us are really coming to grips with the fact that we are going to be home working for quite a long time. I spoke to somebody yesterday who works for a company that I do freelance work for or projects for, and they said that they just found out that they're not going back in until at least 2021. So that's not unusual, especially for mid-sized to larger sized companies. But the smaller companies are definitely, also dealing with these choices and what they're going to do and managing those things. And as a result, whether you're like me and you're quote unquote self-employed and you have a small business, it's not quote unquote, I am self-employed, or you work for a company, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be based at home doing business now and starting to face the realities as we are moving very closely to, in some places in the world already there in August, but in other places in September, the realities of education and how we manage that if you have children. And that's a whole other challenge that we're dealing with right now. So I want to be very candid, open about this, have a conversation about it. For some of you, you don't have children. You may just have a partner or spouse or something like that, and you're managing that dynamic. For some of you, you do have one or more children, so you have to manage that dynamic. And the reality is that that even for somebody like me that has worked from home for, in some capacity, for almost 25 years. Coming in 2021, it will be 25 years. But really working from home, besides traveling, which used to be a big component of what I did and is now, of course, become a much smaller component of what I did, I have been working from home pretty much exclusively for the better part of 21 years. But this is so different from any of that. It doesn't even equate. There's no apples and apples. It's, it's apples and, I don't know, chuck steak. It's ridiculous in terms of the differences between what's going on, because there was, regardless of the issues that came up, for me being somebody that grew up in the New York area, 9/11 and how that affected some things. And then also the big one, which was obviously 2008, at least here in the States, with the whole crash in the housing market and everything else and how that affected things. Those were things that very negatively impacted me as a business and how much business I was getting. But there were so many other components to life that were predictable that this is almost more like what happened when I lived in the New York area and we had that storm Sandy come through, and we went without power for almost 10 days, and we were, lining up for gas at the gas station. It just changed your daily routine, the things that were predictable. And that's a weird analogy, but what I'm saying is that we're now sort of dealing with this combination effect of trying to sort out for ourselves how we manage being productive and getting work done, and then also having to deal with the unpredictable, at times predictable situations having to do with our lives and our daily routines, schedules, because that's the thing that's so unsettling about what's happening, I think, for many of us right now, is that we're told one week, okay, you are going to, let's just say, we'll use children as an example because I have to manage that with a college-aged, a high school, and a middle school-aged, kids. And I said it incorrectly. I was going to, I should forget it. 3 kids, college, high school, middle school. And how do you manage that when you're being told different things from different schools, and you're being told that everybody's going to go back to school with distancing one week, and then your governor steps in and says, oh, no, you're not, and now you have to deal with either sending your kid to school and doing online classes from their dorm room, or working from home, or some hybrid capacity of that, and not knowing how long it's going to last. And then you've got to run a business. Holy crap, right? So, and let's say you're single, and the situation is you used to go in and work with colleagues, and you had an environment where you had camaraderie to whatever extent, and now you're being told that you have to work from home, and you don't have the opportunity to interact. Or you have a spouse and you're juggling, or a partner, and you're juggling the fact that you're both now working from home, and you're potentially working out of a studio apartment, or at best a 1-bedroom apartment in a city somewhere. Well, these are all realities now. These are not things that are what ifs. They're not hypotheticals. They are things that are happening to all of us every single day. And the people, to my knowledge, that are coming to this channel are creatives. So that also has its own set of unique challenges when it comes to how do we manage the balance of doing what we do creatively when we can, and we're being hired to do it, and secondly, being creative people. And I think that that's somewhat unique. I think that there are other, areas that people have expertise in. Let's say you're a scientist, as an example. You work inside of a laboratory. Maybe you still get to work inside of a laboratory because that's a controlled environment. When you come home, unless it's a bad example, because a scientist who's trying to come up with a cure for something is probably exactly like a creative person. They're just obsessively thinking about how they can solve the problem or create something or do something. So I don't know if I have a good analogy for that, but we are creative. And as creative people, we have to feed a certain outlet of creativity with all of this stuff going on. And it becomes very hard for us because, we're not allowed to do the things that we normally do in terms of being in spaces, going freely to places and stuff like that. How fortunate to live in Oregon where there's space, and I went to the coast yesterday and was shooting some hero footage for a camera course, tutorial series that I'm doing, and that was great. And I was on the beach, and I wasn't near anybody except for my family, so I was able to do that without a mask, and that was really liberating. But it's just sort of how we have to get through everything that can be very frustrating. So I'll talk a little bit about what I'm doing, but I really want the chat to kind of get going, and for us to have a conversation. For me, the reason I do the live streams is so that we are having a conversation, and that's where the advantage is. And this conversation can go in any direction you want it to. It can have to do with how you manage the realities of working from home and how you do that, and asking questions or starting conversations about that. Or it can be about the technical side of things, as I'm trying to figure out how I do a setup here. I'm trying to figure out what kind of equipment I need and those types of things, and it can go that route. And for me personally, the first thing that I had to decide when this all started to happen was, where the hell am I going to work? Not decide. I had to ask that question, and then I had to figure it out, because what happened in the spring is going to be very different than what happens coming up this autumn or fall. But it is, it is something that I really had to figure out. So, for instance, I'm in this barn right now. It's a big space, but it's an unfinished space. So when you're in cold weather here, it is virtually impossible to use this space because of the lack of insulation. So if I'm shooting videos out here temporarily for a day or two, I'm running space heaters. I'm cutting those off. We're, with a studio that's fully set up, we're cranking some content out. We take a break. We run those again. It's very inefficient in terms of the way to go forward with using this space. And then in the summer, I have another challenge, which is this is a metal roof barn. It has 2 floors, and essentially that second floor becomes an oven late morning in the day. And contrary to maybe what people have heard, Oregon is, at least Western Oregon, is very wet. Very wet. It is very wet in the winter. It is very dry in the summer. And so we can go for sometimes 4 to 5 months with virtually no rain, which I guess is why this climate is so ideal for growing grapes, which is a big wine area. But that means for me that even if I'm working downstairs in the barn, which is where I am right now, that usually by about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this space starts to become too warm to work in ideally. I've basically got one window in this space over there, and if I put an air conditioner in there, that would have to be the beast of all beasts to get this space to start to cool down again, because again, no insulation, and that becomes a big challenge. So, and then the challenge that I have is that when this whole thing happened, I built a home studio. I basically stole our music room with some semblance of there still being a music room there. And what I did is I converted that to a home studio. And that was a pretty big build out. It's sound treating the space. It's a standing, sitting desk. It's setting up this teleprompter situation that I have. It was setting up connectivity so that I could have reliable upload speeds on a consistent basis. It was a lot of work for me to get this to the point where I had an effective setup, and that space worked out great if I wasn't running the HVAC system with the air conditioning going with a vent right above me, so I had to time that, and I still do when I use the space. And I also had to make sure that there was coordination, hey Sean, with the rest of the family. So it became a scheduling thing, and that's what you're going to have to start to realize, that whether you have a separate space that is a garage or some other space that's out of the way of the space that you're working in, or it's within one shared space with a partner, spouse, family, whatever it is, scheduling is going to become incredibly important. And where that really starts to become very challenging is with school. Because when you're doing virtual school, when you have kids who are logging into Zoom all the time, not only do you have to work out separate connectivity issues, which I would recommend you have your own connection for your business. It should not be the way people are accessing Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus, and of course, completely not tied into what they're doing with their Zoom stuff. Have your own connection, but at the same time, that scheduling thing means that for clients, you may have to try to do certain things early in the day. When this is all starting to happen in the spring, things started to wake up at a certain time every day. So I would try to get some key things done prior to that, including live streams and stuff like that. Once you get into the afternoon hours, that's where it really starts to become a challenge when you're starting to work this up. But you have to get whoever is under that roof with you on board to schedule. So first, it's a space. You have to have a space, and to set up and break down a space every day is insane. And I'm not saying that some of you won't have to do it, but you have to try to work out a space that you can go to that is primarily set up to allow you to work from home. And then it's really about scheduling. And some of that scheduling is not going to be in your control because of the other people that are inside of your house, but you have to work it out, and you have to work it out with your company, with your clients, whatever that situation is, in order to do that. So here we go. So could COVID rob me of all the alone time I need to think creatively, but I really can't break away from the family? A sweet but painful dilemma. I 100% agree with that. For me, it was really travel, which gave me the ability to have my own headspace, right? My time to think about where I wanted to go creatively. Sometimes exercise those muscles, but also to do that. And I'm finding that right now I'm having to mentally prepare myself for the fact that I have to learn how to do that differently than I've done it before. And there were always times where I'd go out with a camera and I'd go to Portland. I'm not going to Portland right now. Well, I'm not saying I'm not going to go to Portland. That's a bunch of baloney. There's a particular area in Portland where pretty much everything's happening. But again, with COVID and everything, I'm not just freely going everywhere. But what I am trying to do is find different ways to do that. I'm lucky to have this barn, a place I can go out and get some headspace. And I happen to be married to somebody who's creative, and I've sort of watched those patterns, and I see that she also needs to have some time. And it's a balance of figuring that out, but I think part of it is also communication. It's communicating with the other people in your house and realizing that this is not a normal situation, of course, and it's not a normal way to go about living your life based on the way we've lived it as a society, almost worldwide, with slight changes in terms of cultures and things like that. But as a whole, for the last, who knows, 150 years, there's sort of been a pattern to the way that most people live their lives, which is somewhat similar in terms of we have mandatory school for children that go from a certain age to a certain age, slightly different in different countries around the world. And there's patterns that we have set up that allow us to have our work life, our social life. That's all kind of going out the window now. And it will be very interesting because I do believe that this pandemic will end at some point. And I'm not saying that something won't ever happen again. And this is going to negatively and for some positively impact their lives. But I think we're looking at a situation where we're going to be looking at our schedules and the way we run our lives very, very differently. We already know that there's going to be less going into an office, which could help the environment, which could help certain things. But it also takes certain types of people to work from home, right? So it's not everybody can work from home. It does take a certain type of person to have that discipline, and depending on what your dynamic is under your roof, that can make that easier or harder depending on the other people and how they feel about that. Oh, you were in the hospital. Rabid, I'm so sorry. I'm glad you're back, and thank you for coming to the show. The value of VR technology has been as a result of this pandemic. I think we should all consider learning these tools. Daniel, I believe, the virtual production model, it's not even virtual, it's real production. But what we're doing is we're starting to see projection-based, wall-based production starting to take hold. And of course, Matt Workman is doing some stuff on a very small scale, which scales up to a big scale. He's also doing the big scale stuff. But there are, this is not something that's brand new to movies and production, but it's starting to take hold. So we start to look at using Unreal Engine and, panel walls. And these are skills that I think are going to be very important. Good morning, Michael. Joe, sorry you have to go, and there'll be a replay. So, plus you turn into eating English breakfast every day. Yeah, that's true. Heart attack. Oh, here we go. Now we're talking about. We're back to food. I just ordered a the food thing is a big thing too. I happen to be a big foodie. So I invested in a new computer, even though I probably shouldn't, but I had to. There was one project that justified it. I haven't had a new laptop in almost 5 years, and I got a new MacBook Pro because I'm starting to work with a lot of higher resolutions, bigger data rate files and things like that. So it really doesn't feel like a huge upgrade except for what's inside of the machine, which is a huge upgrade in terms of stuff. When you take a computer that is 4.5+ years old and you upgrade that with all of the latest stuff, then you really do start to notice a difference on there. But everyday usability for live streams and stuff is virtually identical. Where do you see the best opportunities for live streaming for businesses or for people who are used to doing conferences or small events ideas? That's a great question. So for me as a business, the first thing that I had to do was learn how to do this. I mean, we're talking, a second ago, Daniel brought up VR technology and sort of what's happening in production. That's a big area to take on in terms of learning, and I think it's going to have a lot to do with where you are geographically to an extent, unless you go down Matt Workman's rabbit hole. But he's a very unique individual, and I mean that in the best way. He is tuned to think as somebody who is a programmer, who is a cinematographer, who does all of that kind of stuff. Okay, go solder a wire on an SUV. See you in a minute, David. But that whole area is, the opportunities for that are going to be for normal human beings. Is really going to be about getting into an environment that allows you to learn those skills. And that means that, maybe in smaller markets like Seattle and, Raleigh and, I'm just thinking of smaller markets, we'll say Orlando and in the U.S., obviously in other countries, there's smaller markets, right? So you're in, south of France, and Nice may be a smaller market. Maybe there's somebody who's starting up something and you can get involved with that if you're, following local production and things. But it's going to be the larger markets for sure. In the States, it's going to be New York, L.A., We're going to have some stuff, obviously, Atlanta. Those are the three big spots. But then there'll be some stuff in Albuquerque, New Mexico. There'll be, other places like that where that's going to happen. VR technology will hopefully expand to education. Right now, there's a lot of things going on. I've always wanted to take this space and set it up with multiple cameras, and now with something like the A10 Mini Pro, it's going to be possible. But what I'd love to do is essentially sit inside of CineTracer and say, okay, we are standing here and we are in the middle of a set for a city, and what we have behind me is we've got 10 city blocks that are visible. We've got skyscrapers around me. We've got this open area here, which is similar to Times Square or Astor Place or wherever it is. I'm just taking New York because I grew up there as an example. We're Piccadilly Circus, Leicester Square, whatever. If you're in London, we're in these spaces, and what I get to do is essentially have other people connect to and share that experience inside of that virtual space and say, okay, so if we were shooting a film and we wanted to light this, what are some of the options? And then what we do is I don't know what the hell that meant. What we do is we go into the tools inside of CineTracer and we pull out the equivalent of a 20K HMI, and we throw that up on the top of 5 buildings, or whatever it's going to be, and then we bring talent in and we place them and we start to do that. And the idea is that for the type of thing that I'm doing, that I get to help people learn in that way. I'm just feeding off of what you're saying, Daniel. But when we talk about education in other ways, now we have to create virtual environments where people can teach people skills related to laboratory, right? For scientists and things like that. For people who are architects and the ability to be able to not only use CAD tools, but then interact with engineers and maybe collaboratively doing that. Which is what's very unique about a school like Cooper Union in New York, which I used to do a lot of work for. They're a combination of an art school, architecture, and engineering, and there's this combination. So what if you took that concept and you made that virtual, and you were allowing people with different disciplines to become problem solvers? And I think that that's what's interesting. We need our reading, we need our writing, we need our arithmetic, we need the basics. That's obviously changing as we have computers inside of our pockets and how we can access information. But at the same time, we should be thinking about a future of education which has to do more with problem solving than it does just those basic skills. The reality is that most human beings are smart enough to learn the basics very quickly. If the program of education is very effective. And the more visual and the more hands-on that education is, the less it's a page with a bunch of equations, the more that you have the actual physicality and the doingness of it, the practicality of education is the most effective. So if you can take kids from the age of 3 or 4 and everything that they do is based on a balance of theory and practical, and they're getting that, and you're able to provide that environment by the doingness, and of course working on an actual car instead of a virtual car is much better. But as we go forward, the technology is going to allow that experience to become more and more and more realistic in terms of what you can do. I had no idea we were going this route on this conversation, but that's the way my mind works. So I think that what that means is both educationally and also from a work standpoint, the more we can collaborate in environments, is important. And yes, I would say that number is even higher. You say 80% of education is learning how to learn. I was fortunate enough to learn how to learn when I grew up, and I had an education, and a curriculum that was based on that. And that's been the biggest asset I've gotten from my education, is I continue to learn every single day. And the beauty is that, we talk about this place, Alexandria, the greatest library in history. Well, guess what? It exists. It's here, and it's everywhere. There's a lot of noise in that library. There's a lot of incorrect information or information that you may not agree with. They're two different things. But if you sift through and you get smart about how to use that library, there is so much information out there right now. And you can become interested in learning about almost any subject matter, and it's pretty remarkable what's available, both free and paid, to become better at what you want to learn how to do. So, but a PowerPoint and a keynote presentation ain't it. That's not the thing that's going to make this work. And the way we're going to not only get through what's going on right now, but we are going to expand in terms of the way that we are doing things is by collaborating. And that's the beauty of video production and filmmaking, is that we're already generally people who are collaborating with each other. We're working together. Most disciplines, most areas have as their success model individuals who have ideas, who are good at collaborating with other people to problem solve. Sometimes it's just the one person, and sometimes it needs to be that. And some of our greatest inventors and things have been those types of people. But they still need collaborators generally to execute. You don't have an Edison, who's going to do what they're going to do without having people, including Tesla, but who are going to be able to be contributors to problem solving and doing those things. So we don't solve future problems without collaborating and working together. And so I think that what's interesting about that is that, there are parallels between what we need to look at in terms of education and also how we work more effectively going forward. Because ultimately, if you really think about it, almost any business, almost anything that you're doing has to do with looking at something, identifying what the situation is, identifying whether it's a situation that has a problem to solve or not, and then executing whatever you need to do to get a result. So it doesn't always have to be a problem, but generally, if you walk into a doctor's office and you say, my head hurts here, then the doctor has to assess what might be causing the hurts here thing and goes through a battery of tests to figure that out. And then based on that and their knowledge and their education, they're going to make a particular decision, may or may not be the same decision that another doctor is going to make. And they're going to prescribe some sort of either physical or or some sort of physical program that you have to do, or you might have to take medicine or whatever it's going to be, right? So that's just an example. But the point is that we're problem solvers. So, one of the things that I think you can do is you can start to take the viewpoint that when you are working, that you're taking it from the standpoint of being a problem solver. It's understanding. And you have to be really careful. When you run your own business, don't solve everybody's problems in a conversation, because then they'll just think their problem is solved. That doesn't mean the problem has been solved. It just means that you're discussing what it could be. It's more about assessing, okay, so what is it that you want to accomplish? Okay, we have a problem. I can help you solve that problem, and there's going to be some exchange for me to do that. And I don't mean that you're being, dodgy about it. I just mean that I have found historically, especially when I was younger, I'd have all these great conversations. We'd have, a meeting or, a conference with a client and come up with all of these creative ideas. And then I'd never get a job because they felt like either, they could execute it themselves or the problem was seemingly solved. I hope that doesn't seem like it's too weird. What do I think? I'm going to go back to you now, Kalman, is where do you see the best opportunities for live streamer businesses or for people who are used to doing conferences or small events? So for me, it's been learning skills. I'm sorry it took so long to get back to that question. And the initial skills I needed to learn were, of course, yes, I need to find a space, but build the space out so I had a usable space. And those skills may be slightly different for me based on my background than for somebody who is not interested in video production and this side of things. So maybe the way I'm doing it is a little bit different than others. But the basic setup of what we need to do is we need to learn the skills, if we're helping clients do this, of how do we attain and provide a reliable internet connection. That might be going to someone like Teradek and getting the VidiUU, and then getting an account where you have two basically modems that are inside of that unit. So even if you're in a remote area, you're getting a reliable enough upload link that you can provide that service to a client when you go on site for virtual events. It's having, of course, the right camera and lighting and audio technology to pull this off. It doesn't have to be complicated. If you're in a space for yourself or for a client that is a controlled space, then the lighting does not have to be expensive. It's just more about how you control that light, bounce that light, diffuse it, where you're placing it, trying to minimize reflections, all of those types of things. Audio could be, one of three basic approaches. One would be a lavalier, a body style mic. One could be a headset mic. Maybe like some of my clients, you're teaching health and fitness and things like that. So you're moving around, or you're doing a cooking show, or you're creating content around that, or you happen to be somebody who is talking to people a lot, but you're moving around and you have to show them things. So, the lavalier may be a wireless lav may be a great option, but if you're around here a lot and doing things, then having a headset mic might be a better option to do that. And then obviously you could also use something like this, which is, sorry about the scratching there, that's just a video mic NTG, and I've got that placed just out of frame, or it could be seen in frame. It doesn't necessarily matter depending on what you're doing. So that knowledge and knowing how to do that, and having a little switcher like an ATEM Mini or an ATEM Mini Pro, those are skills that you can then translate to sellable services. And those are things that I've started to do for clients. So I have an individual or a company, and they want to set up their space to do something like this, but obviously their business model is different. And what I do is I help them scout their space. We talk about where equipment could be placed. I talk to them about what equipment they need, and then they're paying me for that consulting time. And then what I'm doing is recommending equipment and things like that. And that's all part of a package. I'm going to create a course on remote production that's going to be available, and it's going to actually be a multi-part course. So I'm taking those skill sets and I'm translating them to things that are going to generate income. But at the same time, it's okay, you have a client, or there's somebody you've worked with in the past. A good example is I have a friend who owns a winery. He had an idea that he wanted to bring in local musicians from Portland without any audience and have them come in and do a Sunday night kind of concert. So the first time there were 2 people, the second time there were 3, the third time there was 1 person, and I came out at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon for a 7 o'clock show. I would set up an XT3 and XT4, the switcher, I would bring my computer, a mobile Wi-Fi hotspot, and essentially I handled the entire production for that virtual event. And that is an area that you can look into and pick businesses, pick things that you not only know may need those services, but also pick companies that provide products or services that you love, that you have interest in, because that's going to make your life so much more enjoyable. It's not really hard work, even though it has challenges and problem solving, when I'm going to a winery and I'm getting to listen to live music and be in a beautiful environment and help produce content around, that type of thing. And it's giving people something that they really need too, because live music is not something we're getting a lot of right now, unless we're watching it online. So, and it can be live with a live stream. So these are all things that I think you should be thinking about over these types of things. And you talk about, that kind of stuff. And Daniel, you've basically, said what now that I'm looking at the chat, essentially what I'm saying. I use the mobile Wi-Fi hotspot I use is the Netgear. Oh my goodness, I've had it on the show before. I'm going blank. It's square, and I'm having a brain fart. And what's nice about it is it has an Ethernet port, and it's on a video I break down. We have to look on the channel for what it is. I mean, I could run over there, but it's actually about 100 feet. I have it's attached to a window over there here in the barn, because facing in that direction, I'm getting the best signal. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm turning off all of the Wi-Fi capabilities of that, and it's essentially a 4G LTE box. So what's happening with that? It is the Nighthawk. Thank you, Michael. So it's the Netgear Nighthawk, and it basically it's bringing in that signal. I'm AT&T, and what I've done is I've hacked that box so that I'm forcing it onto a particular band in my area that's giving me the most consistent down and upload speed. I'm more concerned about upload. And so that mobile Wi-Fi hotspot isn't actually being used for Wi-Fi at all. Again, LTE is coming in. That's my signal. And then I take Ethernet and I run that directly to my computer. And right now I'm getting between about 12 and 16 up, which is just about where I have to be in order to host these live streams and work things out. If I was any lower than about 8 megabits per second, I'd probably be in trouble. But that's the deal. And I'm using Ecamm Live as my, as my system to deliver my live streams, and it just keeps getting better, but it's only Mac based. So, and then if you really want to do a studio in the box, then you do Mimo Live from Boinx software, and that's sort of that's the oracle of live streaming software. I mean, you can really create an entire, production with so much capability with that. I don't, capture card probably isn't the right, if you're talking about my HDMI signal. So I've got Ethernet coming in for my my internet connectivity, and then I'm using either the A10 Mini or the A10 Mini Pro, and mainly because I'm switching. I'm switching between sources, and it's very convenient to do that. So that usually just sits right next to me here on the table. But for a lot of people, they can get a Cam Link, or there's now a lot of options for bringing HDMI in. But most of the major manufacturers, Sony, Canon, Fujifilm, I believe Panasonic's now doing it, have webcam capability that is coming to most of their current cameras, where you actually don't need to have, if you're Mac-based especially, but also for PC people like USB-C, your signal coming directly into your computer. So if you're single cameraing it, really the big thing is that you have to have the concept that if you're not using a smartphone, a laptop computer, or a tablet that either has a built-in webcam, and the ones on the Mac are crappy. I mean, it's just on the new iMac that they've upgraded that camera. And that's the one beef I have about spending the money I did on this MacBook Pro. There isn't even a built-in camera that rivals like the Logitech one that I have. I think it's not in this bag. So I have the little Logitech, here it is. So this is a little Logitech webcam. This happens to be a 1080p version. I can't remember. It's like the 930 or something like that. This is a great little webcam. Is it perfect? No, it has its issues. But that's essentially, come on, where are you? That's what I'm using, sometimes attached to my MacBook Pro when I'm not setting up a setup like this. But the difference is that when your camera's on your device, then you're essentially looking at the camera when you're using a built-in webcam or a third-party one that's attached to the top of your screen. As soon as you move to mirrorless, it's got a level. As soon as if it makes any difference, you're putting it on top of your screen. But as soon as you move to a camera that is no longer part of your main device for broadcasting, then you really have to set it up completely differently. And I've done this on the show before, but effectively what I have in front of me is I have a tripod, and then I have a teleprompter. This is the Cam Buddy, I think it's called. Man, I'm brain farting today. And I have a 10-inch screen that is on there, and then I'm actually, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I don't want to have to use it. I'm using a decimator to do a horizontal flip so I can see everything the right way over here. But this is my communication device. So what I can do now is I can look directly into camera. I can see your comments and your reactions to everything over here. It's a little small. It's a 10-inch, so it's right on the edge for me in terms of how far away it is based on getting older and my eyesight and stuff. But it's just enough so that I can see the people I'm doing a Zoom call with. I can see the comments and reactions. I have to squint a little bit sometimes, and I wish that it was a slightly larger one. But I had to be cost effective. So the monitor itself was $100. The teleprompter was that teleprompter cost $270. And then, of course, the most expensive thing was the decimator to do the horizontal flip. But I am talking to companies like Andy Cine about, can we please just build a proper horizontal flip into there? If you're PC-based, you can get a utility that does it. If you're Mac-based, because of the way they've updated the OS, it's not so easy. Trust me, I've tried everything. So, but I need to make sure that right is right and left is left. Right is right, left is left, and everything reads correctly in front of me. Otherwise, it becomes very hard to do that. So, and these are all of the things that you really need to be thinking. Sorry, I just bumped the mic. My apologies. When you're thinking about setting up your space. But, to sort of recap here, number one is finding a space that you can have be as dedicated as possible to what you're doing. Number two is communication. You have to communicate with the people that you are in the space with, and you have to come up with, even if it's temporary, because everything's a moving target right now, a schedule. And if it's a weekly schedule that everybody has to do this, this, and this, then that's what you have to do. If it's a longer term one, then great. That's even better, because you know that your son has every week at 3 p.m. this particular virtual class, and your daughter has this, or your partner has this. Whatever it's going to be, you have to sort those things out. And then there is an element of discipline. For me, going into the fall, I'm not going to be able to work out there the way I was working in the spring. It's just not going to be feasible. So I'm working really hard to figure out how in the next month or so I can take part of this space and do like a 0.5, because of the reduction of work, I'm not able to do what I want to do, but I do want to put some work into this space so that it's insulated enough that if I warm the space up or I cool the space down, that it will hold temperature and I can work here. Take care, Daniel. Thanks for coming. And, that's what I've got to do going into the fall for myself. But really, in the end, for everybody who's doing this, what you also have to do is I think, have to build into your schedule the other time, because you are going to be in everybody's way, and they're going to be in your way when you're trying to operate in this strange way, this not normal way. And part of the communication is making sure that the schedules work, which will alleviate, if people honor those schedules, a lot of the stress that can exist in the space. But the second thing is to make sure that you acknowledge with each other that you need to have time together that is just time together, that has nothing to do with work, because you'll feel like you're having time together all of the time if there's at least one other person under your roof. But then you also need to figure out some time where you can have some time for yourself. And if you communicate that, I don't know if that's so hard to figure out. You're not saying you want to have time alone because you don't want to be with the person, especially if you're building time in. And if you live in an area where you can go for a hike, or you can have a picnic, or you can go to a restaurant that does it right, then do that as well. And just be safe out there. Be smart about how you go about things based on where you live. And as always, trust your instincts. I think that's the episode. I'm just going to keep figuring stuff out. I'll keep you updated on what I'm doing here in the space. I appreciate everybody who comes to these live streams every week. I appreciate that people, get involved with the chat. And as I said today, oh, he comes in right at the end. There he is, digital filmmaker. How does Jem deliver nuggets after? Well, come on. That's my reminder. I apologize. Of course, that comes up right when I'm ending the show at 10. How does Jem deliver nuggets after nuggets of positive life work advice for an hour straight? Oh, give me a break. That's a bunch of baloney. But I appreciate that. That's not true. I just stream of consciousness. And, try to keep the glass half full if you can, unless you're drinking, I guess. With that, Camera and Flask, 3 p.m. today, Pacific time. We're going to be talking about buy or rent. We're going to be talking about cameras, one of the things that people love to. Why don't people like to talk about lighting as much? I don't know, but that's okay. We'll go with it. And there you go. Yeah, don't worry about it, Clay. I totally understand. We're doing a lot of things, and multitasking is something that is just a huge reality of what we're dealing with. I hope you're getting busier, everybody. And I'll see you later today. And then don't forget to check out the News Shooter YouTube channel tomorrow, because we'll be doing a new show at 4 p.m. And there you go. No problem, Pat. Come by for the show later on. I'm out of here. I got stuff to do, and I appreciate everybody. Take care. Bye.